Those 25% auto tariffs went into effect at midnight on all Canadian-made vehicles.
He's announced a 25% tariff on all cars imported into the United States from the 2nd of April.
A 25% tariff on all cars that are not made in the United States. If they're made in the United States, there's absolutely no tariff.
We will build an all-in-Canada network for auto manufacturing components.
What happens when America's most iconic automakers decide the future isn't in Detroit, but across the border in Canada? This isn't just about cars. It's about entire communities collapsing, Wall Street panicking, and America's global influence slipping through its fingers. A trade war that was supposed to protect U.S. jobs has backfired spectacularly. Ford and Tesla, two of the biggest names in the auto world, are pulling billions of dollars in investment out of America and planting it firmly in Canadian soil. And here's the shocking part. This isn't a slow shift. It's happening right now. It all started with a midnight announcement that caught automakers completely off guard. On April 2nd, the U.S. slapped a 25% tariff on all cars imported from Canada. The logic was simple. Force automakers to build at home or pay the price. Washington believed this would bring factories roaring back to the American heartland. But corporations don't play by patriotic slogans. They play by numbers. And those numbers told a very different story. Instead of coming home, America's automakers decided to move next door. The tariff strategy had backfired in spectacular fashion, igniting a war between policy and profit. Suddenly, it wasn't about protecting American jobs. It was about survival. Ford, the century-old symbol of American industrial might, made a stunning announcement. It would reroute production of its Super Duty pickup trucks to Ontario. These are not small cars. They're the heavy-duty workhorses of America's roads, vehicles that once rolled proudly out of factories in Michigan. Now, they would bear a Canadian stamp. And Ford wasn't alone. Tesla, America's crown jewel of innovation, shifted production of its 4680 battery cells, the critical heart of future electric vehicles, to Quebec. In the U.S., factories in Michigan and Ohio that once dreamed of hosting these production lines stood idle, workers waiting for shifts that never came. Meanwhile, Canadian plants buzzed with fresh investment, creating jobs, prosperity, and momentum that used to belong to America. What started as a patriotic plan had turned into an industrial shell game across the border, and U.S. towns were losing badly. Drive through Michigan or Ohio today, and you'll see the fallout everywhere. Factories that roared for generations are falling silent. Parking lots are overgrown with weeds. Diners that once overflowed with workers at lunchtime now sit empty. In towns like Lordstown, Ohio, and Belvidere, Illinois, once synonymous with steady auto jobs, entire economies are evaporating overnight. School budgets shrink as families pack up and leave. Foreclosure signs spread across neighborhoods like scars. What was once the pride of the industrial heartland has turned into a slow-motion collapse. America's factory towns are becoming ghost towns. And for the plants still operating, things aren't much better. Tariffs have turned every car rolling off an assembly line into a ticking time bomb of hidden costs. The numbers are staggering. Ford reported an $800 million tariff hit in just one quarter, with projections of a $2.5 billion blow to earnings next year. Tesla wasn't spared either. The company took a $300 million loss from tariffs in a single quarter, enough to wipe out profits from tens of thousands of vehicles. And investors noticed. Tesla's stock plummeted by nearly 20% in just a few weeks, vaporizing tens of billions in value. But the crisis didn't end in corporate boardrooms. It landed directly on the shoulders of American consumers. With core components now carrying 25% tariffs, the cost of building a US-made car skyrocketed. Automakers estimated that each vehicle carried up to $6,000 in extra expenses. Dealers quickly passed most of that on to customers. Overnight, new car prices jumped by an average of $4,700. That family SUV that felt within reach just last year suddenly turned into a financial nightmare. Millions of Americans now face a cruel choice: pay thousands more, downsize their dreams, or give up on buying a car altogether. Policies designed to save American jobs are now pricing Americans out of American cars. While America built walls, Canada rolled out the red carpet. The Canadian government and provincial leaders saw an opportunity and seized it. Ford secured $590 million in government funds to overhaul its Ontario plant. Tesla was offered an even larger package, more than $1.2 billion in grants and credits, if it agreed to build its next gigafactory on Canadian soil. And it wasn't just money. Canada offered plentiful clean hydropower, slashing energy costs. It offered fast-tracked permits, meaning projects that would drag on for years in the US could be completed in months north of the border. The result? Ontario hasn't seen such an industrial boom in decades. Factories are expanding, payrolls are growing, and Canadian communities are thriving. Meanwhile, across the Great Lakes in Flint and Dayton, neighborhoods are emptying out. The jobs have moved north, and they're not coming back anytime soon. Even in Washington, the alarm bells are ringing. A former U.S. Treasury Secretary bluntly called the tariffs the biggest self-inflicted wound in modern economic history. Trump's own former vice president slammed the policy as the largest peacetime tax hike ever. Republican lawmakers warned of a bloodbath if the economy slips into recession. And for once, politicians from both sides of the aisle seemed to agree. The strategy was backfiring. Meanwhile, the feud between government officials and industry leaders turned public and ugly. When Trump's trade advisor, Peter Navarro, dismissed Elon Musk as just a car assembler, Musk fired back on X with an insult heard around the world, calling Navarro dumber than a sack of bricks. It was a shocking glimpse into the collapse of the alliance between business and government. Titans of industry and policymakers were now openly at war. The damage wasn't confined to cars. America's entire supply chain began to unravel. For years, roughly half the components in every U.S.-made car were imported. Engines from Mexico, electronics from Germany, steel from Canada. Suddenly, every one of those parts carried a hefty tariff. Ford and Tesla were left paying more for essentials than ever before, while competitors like Toyota and Hyundai, with their global networks, could dodge many of these costs. Washington had kneecapped its own champions. Tesla took another devastating hit when Trump's new plan wiped out the emissions credit market, a revenue stream worth nearly $3 billion a year. Without it, Tesla's profits evaporated almost overnight. And it wasn't just automakers. Coca-Cola shifted can production to Canada. Heinz and Campbell Soup moved operations north. Even Walmart rerouted imports through Canadian ports to escape the tariff squeeze. The trade war had spilled from auto plants into supermarkets, retail chains, and every corner of American life. On Main Street, the chain reaction was brutal. A diner closed because the factory across the street shut down. A hardware store in Indiana shuttered when its supplier went bankrupt. Real estate values tumbled as workers fled to find jobs elsewhere. On Wall Street, the panic spread fast. Stocks swung violently with each new tariff announcement. Trillions of dollars in value vanished. Economists warned that the auto sector turmoil alone could tip the U.S. into recession. Some even invoked the ghost of the Great Depression, comparing the tariffs to the disastrous Smoot-Hawley Act of the 1930s. Globally, America's closest ally, Canada, was now its fiercest trade adversary. Prime Minister Mark Carney stood firm, declaring Canada would never be a junior partner. Canadians rallied behind him, boycotting U.S. products and embracing Canadian-made goods with pride. Meanwhile, the European Union and Asian nations deepened trade ties with Canada, building alternative supply networks that shut America out. The U.S., once the architect of global trade, was now watching from the sidelines. The Made in USA label, once a mark of quality, had started to lose its shine. Buyers abroad saw risk, unpredictability, and chaos. The irony is staggering. A policy meant to protect American jobs may go down as the very decision that crippled the U.S. auto industry. Ford and Tesla aren't just shifting production, they're shifting the future. Canadian towns are booming while America's industrial heartland is hollowing out. And here's the haunting question. If America's auto industry can flee, what's next? This isn't just a story about tariffs, cars, or factories. It's a story about power, survival, and whether America can still control its own destiny in a world that's changing fast.